Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got a good crew with me today, and I really am excited to talk about Citrix HDX and the high definition experience. I believe that's what HDX stands for. Of course, a lot of us are older, and we still love to talk about ICA and all the great things you can do with the protocol and beyond. So I've got, speaking of older, hey, Bill, how's it going?
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. I'll put my teeth back in before I talk.
Look, so I was watching TV the other day, and Consumer Cellular had a commercial, and it would show at the bottom of the commercial the year the person was born. You know, Consumer Cellular is targeted towards senior people, right?
Right.
Those numbers at the bottom of that screen are getting really close to my birth year.
Well, eventually they will. They'll get there. I don't even want to know what they were because they're probably past my birth year. But nevertheless, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
We were out skiing out in Utah a couple weeks ago, and Drew here on our team, Drew Hill, he saw my screen, which to me looks like normal font. He's like, "Oh, that's really huge font." I'm like, "Man, I can't even see it this big." All right, well, Bill Sutton, Director of Services. Bill and I just got off our management call, so Bill's a busy guy, and things are continuing to ramp up in 2021, and people are getting busy. Ben Rogers, local sales engineer, yes, also healthcare sales engineer. Ben, how's it going?
I'm doing fine, Danny. I'm just glad you didn't load that old question onto me because my age is getting up there as well. I got beat by my son in golf yesterday. So talk about a little realization of your age and where you're at in life.
Yeah. I never could beat my grandparents or father in golf. They just played too much. It's a skill you have to work on. I did take my kids out training for track season, right? And we ran 200s. We ran 8 200s. And then they ran an 800 like for real. And then I raced them in a 400, and I did beat both of my kids, but they were exhausted. I mean, they barely could get around the track. All right. Well, Nitin Sharma's with it. Nitin, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Andy?
Good. Tell me your role, your title at Citrix these days. I don't know if it's changed since the last podcast.
It may have. It's been a minute since I've been on a podcast with you. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager underneath the Workspace Services team, specifically under the virtual app and desktop part of the portfolio. For folks that are not familiar, I've been with Citrix for about, I would say now it's almost like 9 years, I think. Worked in various roles and kind of, rolled into app and desktop, been on the marketing team for that for a couple years. And then, focus on mostly the HDX portion, which is very relevant for, why I'm here to kind of cover in some of the latest stuff that we've sort of, it was sort of a packaging of everything that we've released over the past couple years.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into it then. So, and I'm gonna make a joke here, so just bear with me. I got to go to Home Depot later and get some trash bags. They're going to be HDX trash bags. What does HDX in the world of Citrix mean, and why the heck didn't you guys trademark that if at all possible?
That's so funny because I remember going into Home Depot, and obviously I've been to Home Depot before starting my career at Citrix, and I never really noticed HDX ever. And then now working at Citrix and specifically with a lot of the HDX team, then now that's all I see. I walk in and I notice, HDX, what is it? It's their Home Depot brand, right? That's their store brand.
Yeah.
So, so for folks that are not familiar, high definition experience, that's what it initially was coined for. It's kind of like what it is when we're talking about HDX, we're talking about, essentially the Citrix protocol and what it is that we're doing to improve that Citrix session. The users aren't using, they're not getting they're streaming their apps, their data, their desktops, and the HDX teams our core focus on that is ensuring that they get a very enriched, optimized experience, no matter the device network, how far they are from the resource location. It's basically giving them that improved experience, and so they can be productive and sort of have that ideal Citrix experience when they're launching and working every day.
Yeah, let me do a couple Andy things real quick. Number one, computers, Windows applications, they were meant to be executed local. The fact that this stuff works at all and worked over really bad networks back in the day, but the fact that it works at all is pretty amazing. And HDX is really just a marketing term that kind of encompasses all of the user experience things Citrix does. And when you try to talk about something HDX, it's always important to add that last piece, like HDX Teams optimization or whatever it is. Because if you talk to a technical person like one of us and you just say HDX, I mean, you could be talking about brooms at Home Depot or everything under the sun under the Citrix user experience world. So I think you did a really good job of kind of kicking off the intro into the podcast. And I'll turn to Bill real quick because he's been around a while. Bill, how many times in your career have you had to explain ICA and what that stood for to people and they still didn't quite get it?
Oh, a number of times, and they often did not get it. You're absolutely right.
And ICA stands, which is the original name for the Citrix protocol. Or actually, you know what? The remote desktop protocol was probably originally the Citrix protocol, and then when they did their deal with Microsoft, it had to become something else. But ICA stands for what?
Independent Computing Architecture.
And that's the thing, right? You say that to somebody like, okay, so now what does that mean? So Nitin and team, somebody in marketing decided we got to get a sexier name, and that's where HDX comes from.
Right, exactly.
And a more inclusive name, not just protocol centric.
Right.
So Nitin, we have this blog that you authored or were part of authoring called "Reflecting on the Most Popular HDX Innovations of the Past 2 Years." What was the genesis of doing this one?
So it's kind of it started off from where we had a previous blog where we did a wrap up as far as like another one that came out two years prior. The latest innovations that we've come out with the HDX team from our HDX engineering team. So that was sort of the creating another type of blog, very relevant, and it came out towards the end of the year, sort of wrapping up a lot of the key technologies that our HDX team came out with, a lot of the most requested, the most popular, and also just kind of showcasing, we're releasing current release, our actual updated VDAs every quarter. So the team is also improving the actual overall CPU usage, RAM usage of, the Citrix VDAs. When I say VDAs, Virtual Delivery Agent, for folks who are not familiar, because I'm using acronyms.
There you go.
So not only are we always constantly improving it, but we're also putting in big core features. So this blog was sort of, a summary of some of the big core features that we came out with over the past couple of years.
So Nitin, irregardless of time, what is the most impactful feature that's ever happened in the world of Citrix that helped to overcome the challenges of a remote display protocol over various types of network? What's the one killer one that you would think of?
Oh, I would say adaptive transport, which is something that we released over the past couple of years. That's very relevant for, a lot of users that are specifically now today where you have a lot more of a remote workforce.
Right.
So it sort of intelligently optimizes that, that Citrix session depending on what network they're on. They could be on, further away from the resource location on a poor network. Adaptive transport will sort of intelligently optimize that Citrix experience. That's essentially,
and that's using UDP, right? To go as fast as you can, as much as you can, but knowing that we can fall back to TCP if we need to take things under better control, right? Correct.
Yeah, it's supposed to prioritize UDP, but in the event that you can't, it flips over to TCP. But the user still has that session. Yeah. But yeah, that's probably one of the more impactful features that we released over the past few years.
So when I explain that one to someone, it's like me driving from here to Miami on the interstate. I could drive 100 miles an hour and get there without traffic and everything would be great. But if there's a lot of traffic, then we're better off if we all drive 55 miles an hour. That way we don't have a crash and collision and things. It's not as fast, but it's under control and we get there the best possible time we can, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Hey, Ben Rogers has been in the Citrix sales engineer role about a year. Ben, as a customer, is there any specific Citrix HDX feature that you recall being the one that kind of let your portfolio around Citrix unwind and become more and more useful?
Well, I won't speak to one on the past. I can speak to one on the future. This optimization for Microsoft Teams, and I won't steal any of the mojo for future conversations here, but that one feature has really made a difference. And I've seen that specifically in projects that I've been in since I've been in Citrix. And to Nitin's point, when they're doing these updates, some of these changes they make to these optimization packs really do make a difference and really do bring a better experience. I'm in a voice over IP project right now, and they heavily utilize on Teams. And we've seen differences in just the last 2 or 3 updates that have came out that have increased the experience for the users in this arena. So really cool stuff going on here. And like I said, this is what I'm excited about, to see how we can offload some of this onto the local machines, how we can do the optimization, and really how we can create a really killer experience in a virtualized environment.
Yeah. Hey, before we move on to that one, I will tell Nitin, I'm using a Chrome OS right now to do the podcast, and that's the one workspace app VDA combination that doesn't have EDT and Light and Display Transport Protocol. And we've run into at least one customer recently that wants to go all in on Citrix from their Chrome environment. They just don't have the power of EDT yet.
I'm sure the teams are probably familiar with that and working through that.
They are. Yeah, they definitely are. All right. So let's jump into Ben's topic. So the first topic in your section of, in the last 2 years, best optimizations for HDX. The first one is Microsoft Teams. And as we're all seeing, Teams is becoming Teams, the evolution from Skype. But in this pandemic scenario, Teams is becoming more and more and more important as a digital workspace that includes real-time collaboration, voice and video. That's obviously one that you guys want to highlight, right? Yeah.
So Teams optimization for folks that are Citrix users or familiar with Citrix, they're familiar with when we came out with Skype for Business optimization. We have a long partnership with Microsoft. We've worked with them for decades on improving, those type of communication platforms. So this is actually building off some of that partnership and history from where we came from the Link days to Skype for Business, and then now we're Microsoft Teams. Microsoft is obviously putting a huge priority for Teams. They find it as more and more users are going to be wanting to interact and communicate and share files and chat via these communication type platforms. And what it does from a technical perspective, it is, as Ben was kind of hinting at, it offloads a lot of the screen sharing, CPU usage, RAM to that local endpoint, so it frees up that back-end data center. And it sort of ensures that there's an optimized experience for that user that's accessing Teams through a Citrix virtual app or desktop. It's a very, very 30,000-foot view as far as what it's going. And then why would you use Citrix to publish Teams? Well, IT teams get a lot of that centralized management control that they normally get with any sort of virtual app or desktop. So they can apply security policies and different types of policy controls within that for that application. But the end user itself gets that optimized experience for that communication platform.
So Bill, have you run into many projects lately with Teams being involved? The Teams as in collaborative part of Teams?
Maybe 1 or 2, not, maybe more than that actually, where the Teams optimization has been something that has been needed to support what they're doing. The one question that's come up, which I think we've answered, is Nitin, is the optimization in the Workspace app now, or is it a separate for the endpoint, or is it a separate install?
It's part of the Workspace app and VDA.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
And Ben, I'm assuming you're running into customers in healthcare that are, this is part of their core requirement now, not a one-off, but part of their day-to-day workflows.
Oh yeah, and also in finance now. I mean, anybody that's the work from home really kind of put light on this. And one of the other things I want to talk about, which is not particularly to this subject, but just how Teams is affecting organizations. Nitin, since we've really made the push to Teams in Citrix, at first it was just IMing and doing some meetings, but now during the day I've got people calling me on Teams. So I'm kind of now starting to move away from my cell phone for my day-to-day communication with people within Citrix and moving towards using Team as my communication tool within Citrix, which is going to bring even more optimization needs. And then if you combine this with SD-WAN and being able to really, send that traffic directly from that local machine or that branch site directly to Microsoft, it just creates a lot more efficient, bandwidth utilization, user experience. I mean, just tons of things that go in the pro column for why you would want to use this and why you would want to utilize this technology.
Yeah, I do want to stop and highlight something Nitin said real quick, and that is, the chat message, the written communication within Teams. That's a no-brainer, right? And then other things Citrix is doing around bringing in like workspace intelligence type concepts into Teams. Those are important. But this optimization is really about offloading to the local device the bidirectional communication, so it's not having an issue with latency related challenges. Now, Nitin, do you have any real world experience of people who don't optimize Teams, but they're doing it on their local area network and the latency is so low that they don't need to optimize it or offload it?
So, I mean, yeah, they could. I mean, I've sort of anecdotal feedback I've heard. I think the obviously, like, you could, run it within your local machine and locally install it, but there are aspects of, if you're running it through Citrix, where it, like when we're talking about adaptive transport and in EDT, like, if we were mentioning that earlier. So if you're running Teams within a virtual session, a lot of that kind of plays a factor in sort of improving that, the Teams experience, if they're running it virtually, whereas if they're running Teams locally installed, but they have a poor connection, they may not necessarily get that sort of experience. And then I think Ben mentioned like some of the advantages of using some of the other technologies like SD-WAN to kind of help improve that experience versus like if you were just running Teams without any sort of back end or any through, running through Citrix.
Yeah, we just had that conversation, I think Friday, with a customer who, we're trying to explain the HDX optimizations for all things Office 365, not just Teams, and having the SD-WAN be able to break out from within the HDX protocol, because Citrix has the secret sauce there. That's extremely valuable compared to other SD-WAN solutions.
Well, in healthcare, when you talk about DICOM images, so for your healthcare administrators out there that are having to deliver a high resolution experience to your physicians, and you're having trouble doing that over traditional internet or VPN, this is where this technology can help you. We can offload some of that video onto the local machine and create that high def image that they need to do diagnostic quality studies at their home. So this is huge for trauma centers and, doctors and surgeons that are on call, that they're getting called in the middle of the night. They need a way to be able to make decisions, and they need diagnostic quality imaging to be able to do that. This is a way to deliver that comprehensively without really relying on what's on the endpoint. If we can use the power, that's great. If not, we can bring it back to the data center. But either way, we can optimize the connection to deliver a high definition video experience to the end user.
And when you bring it back to the data center over the legacy HDX protocol, using UDP or TCP, it's still not a bad experience. It's just we're trying to make it as native looking and feeling as possible. I mean, Bill and I don't know about the rest of you guys, but Bill and I are of a certain age where we used to do this over dial-up modems.
Oh, yeah.
And it was about the only way you could do it. All right, Nitin, moving on to the next topic, HDX Real-Time Optimization Pack 2.9 LTSR, long-term service release. What's that talking about?
So that's it's interesting because it's what the previous folks that were, organizations that were running Skype for Business, they were using our HDX Real-Time Optimization Pack, which was what was doing the optimization for Skype for Business. It was doing that offloading to the endpoint, offloading audio and video and chat to that user's endpoint, very similar to what Teams optimization is doing. But so some, organizations, like while they're making that shift over to Teams from Skype, there's some organizations that may not be doing it just as of yet. There could be specific reasons why, a number of reasons why that they're not making that full shift yet. So we basically introduced the long-term service release of the HDX optimization pack for Skype. And for folks not familiar with long-term service release, that's mostly our release that we term, for stability and long-term support. So it's to introduce a couple of features, but also ensures that customers can still run optimization for Skype for Business, and we're going to support it for up to 5 years on that 2.9 LTSR HDX release.
Hey, then are you able to talk to us about where this starts to apply to other vendors like WebEx and GoToMeeting and Zoom and RingCentral? Are all these types of things being built into the Citrix HDX world so they'll be able to get optimization as well?
Yeah, we actually do have versions of like it could either be a pack or it's part of the VDA. We do optimize other communication platforms like Zoom, Cisco. We go beyond just introducing optimization for Skype for Business or Teams. So we do have it. They could be various. They're depending on, you'll see it from our TechZone articles or docs as far as like what it is that they need to do to ensure that they can optimize whatever it is that they're using. But yeah, we do offer that type of support.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we could talk about those two all day. Well, let's move on to the next one, virtual biometric authentication.
So that's FIDO2 for folks that are not familiar with it. Or FIDO2 is that sort of passwordless authentication. So for folks that are not, for most IT folks should be aware of why the password is not necessarily as secure as they think they are. It is. So we've introduced FIDO2 support, which is that sort of biometric authentication, where your fingerprint scanners, or if you have a USB key that has a fingerprint reader, that removes the ability for that user to enter that password in physically. So FIDO2 support, we've introduced it within our virtual desktop sessions. So virtual desktop version 2009, which we released mid last year, and later actually supports that passwordless support, which is known as FIDO2.
So what does that mean? Does that mean the VDA, the Workspace app can use the biometrics to get you into your virtual app or desktop session, or it can use it once you get there, you can continue to use it into other apps? What does that mean?
So once you're within your virtual desktop, you could, it recognizes and can utilize that FIDO2, I want to say device or key within a virtual desktop. So you can launch your, so if you launch Windows Desktop and you go to Microsoft.com, you're trying to log into your 365 applications, it can actually just do that passwordless access. You could use a fingerprint scanner or facial recognition, whatever is like a FIDO2 supported type device.
So let me ask a question about this. Go ahead, Andy.
Let me say something real quick. So we in the blog, we kind of skipped over this little video that goes over the Citrix protocol and all the different channels and the concept of redirection versus pass through. If you're listening to this podcast, do yourself a favor and go look at this blog. There's a really good video that kind of gives people who aren't familiar with Citrix an overview of just how the channel system works. Ben, go ahead.
So one of the questions I want to ask, let's say you had a thin client, and Andy, you're gonna enjoy this question. Let's say you had a thin client that was programmed to boot up into a published desktop. So we boot the thin client up, we bring them into a Citrix login. Are you stating that with the FIDO2 technology and the FIDO redirection in the VDA, we could have a fingerprint reader or an eye reader or facial recognition that would go ahead and take care of that initial authentication and bring them directly into the desktop without the use of passwords? This now can all be done with devices, and it can be done through a published desktop being published from a thin client?
So the initial release, when we did it, it's actually doing it within the virtual channel or virtual session, not necessarily the Workspace app yet. I think that could be tied to like other type of, type of software that you'd be using. I mean, that's a good question because I've gotten that before and I need to get more clarification on it. But from where we're talking about it, from the virtual biometric authentication, it's within the actual virtual session.
So Ben, for example, within the session, are you launching an app and it needs to biometric identify you? That app could, if it's in the VDI or in the published desktop. I do want to pause on that real quick. That works whether it's Windows 10 or Server OS, or is it just one or the other?
Windows 10 and Server OS.
Okay. And so it passes through to the app, but getting into the virtual desktop, that could be as simple as using similar biometrics to get your domain authentication and then doing domain pass-through, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. For me, like that's one of the things where I've sort of, to be honest, like the more limited knowledge, that's one of our security teams are familiar with that. But I know from the FIDO2 stuff, that's more like within the virtual session we're talking about.
Okay, and there's a good video that goes along with that one as well. Next section is ICA and Gateway Service Rendezvous. Nitin, help us understand what that one's meaning.
So that one is customers have been looking for like our cloud-based HDX proxies. They've been using, cloud connectors, basically if they're familiar with ICA sessions, they'd be proxied through like a Citrix cloud connector to reach the gateway and then the user. But as the user base, like for a company, it can grow from hundreds to thousands. There's a lot of concurrent sessions. And a lot of times what people do is they'll start adding more cloud connectors, which ends up being difficult to manage and sort of increase that public cloud costs. So to get around that, and we literally kind of created a way to get around that, is called Rendezvous Protocol for ICA sessions. So this feature is designed to sort of improve that connector scalability. So what it does is, for companies that are running workloads in the cloud, it can help them save money by reducing the amount of required cloud connectors and reducing that public cloud consumption. So the intent of that is just basically improving the scalability and of our cloud connectors.
Is that just simply leveraging the public IPs of these VDA hosts?
Yes, I believe so.
And Bill, we did a podcast on this, and you probably paid more attention than I did. What any extra input to add to that one?
Not really. I think you basically create a mapping between the VDA and the cloud, the control plane, if you will, and then it essentially connects directly to the VDA once it's determined which one you're going to access. It basically changes the way the ICA file is structured and sends it to the client so that it can connect directly to the VDA rather than hopping through the cloud connector. But yeah, we did go into a lot more detail in the podcast that we did. So, but that was a while ago. I'm old, so I can't remember.
Well, I just love that you. So ICA, guys, ICA stands for ICA, which you've heard us talk about a little bit. Now we've gotten more. We got a little more up metro on you guys. Now we're calling it ICA versus HDX, and
right.
we're tech guys. We can throw around acronyms all day long to the point where nobody knows what we're talking about. So is that just for public cloud scenarios, or can that be used for on-premises as well?
It's mostly for customers that are running workloads in the public cloud.
Okay. Hey, Ben, any insight on that topic at all, or anything you want to ask or add?
Well, I appreciate the fact they're trying to make the communication more efficient where you need less cloud connectors, because to Nitin's point, you get a lot of cloud connectors on site that starts to, get heavy management. Also, the customer's looking at us going, this is supposed to be more efficient for us, not more of a demand. So anything we can do to reduce that on-prem footprint and get our communication between those cloud connectors and the cloud service itself more efficient, I'm all about. It's awesome.
All right, well, the next section talks about something we talked about a little while ago, which is enlightened data transport, EDT, and MTU discovery. Nitin, what's that covering?
Yeah, so MTU is maximum transmission unit. So if you're not familiar with another acronym there, I mean, when we released EDT, which is our UDP-based protocol, it's to improve that, that Citrix session. So as more customers are consolidating like their data centers, they're migrating workloads to the cloud, it means users are further away from resource locations. So, I mean, later, sort of like around, I think around middle of last year, we made this feature, the EDT smarter, by introducing MTU discovery. So what MTU discovery does, it enables the EDT to automatically determine and set the appropriate MTU for each session, so that every session uses the MTU that is best used for that connection, for that user's connection. So it helps avoid like packet fragmentation, sort of improving that, performance and reliability of the Citrix session. So as very relevant for today, because as more organizations are expanding their remote workforce, and some of them are just kind of moving to larger segments of their workforce being permanently remote, this kind of ensures that the virtual app and desktop experience is pretty optimized.
Well, and let me take a chance on clearing up like MTU conversations. That would be like someone who speaks English, but they speak it from like the New York, like the Manhattan part of New York, very quick, very, well, just say fast, speaking to someone from South Alabama with a very slow dialect, right? And it causes major problems because you might be speaking the same language, but you can't understand each other. And it makes it worse because you get the conversation done, but you slow it down, and then everything around it doesn't break, but everything around it's impacted. I used to work for Microsoft doing Active Directory support. And when we had MTU related issues, it made troubleshooting a nightmare because nobody could figure out what was broken until you got the network guys in. They started doing packet traces and seeing, packets being cut in half and then sent and then resent. So hopefully that helps somebody out there. Ben, any comments on this one, or Bill, either one?
Yeah, I mean, this is about increasing the size and agreeing on the appropriate size of the packets so that they're not fragmented, like you said, Andy. So to use your analogy, that's right on point here. Is the ability just to set the maximum window size or the maximum transmission size and use that and adjust it as needed throughout this session.
Andy, what I always try to do is just make sure the data center switches and anything that was connected into the data center, VMs, switches, hypervisors, all those things are running at jumbo frames. Yeah. That gets hard to do, to take it all the way to the field, to take it all the way to the endpoint. But I always just try to ensure that anything that's running in the four walls of the data center, whatever data center that is, Azure, cloud, yada, 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 just that it's running jumbo frames inside the data center itself, so it can utilize those large packets and get that information across the wire as quick as possible.
So what's the difference between the default 1500 and jumbo frames?
In jumbo frames, 4096. Somebody keep me honest there.
I thought it was higher.
Correct. Is it higher?
Yeah, I thought it was. Well, I could be wrong, but 1500 is standard. I think it's 9,000 for jumbo frames.
So it's
okay. So it's 9,000.
So the default is 1500, and then jumbo frames is 1501 to 9202.
Okay.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
So basically what that means, though, is you're able to throw larger chunks out across your network, larger frames, i.e. jumbo frames.
Yeah.
So again, our protocol has the ability to sense that. And so if the VDA, if our protocol is able to see that I've got clear path and able to do, 9,000 frames across this wire, then man, it's going to take advantage and try to throw those 9,000 frames. Now you ask the difference, 1,500 to 9,000. That's a pretty steep increase there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll do something I do on a lot of podcasts. I'll just recommend the guy. There's a video, 4 hour and something video, CompTIA A+ certification. If you're listening to us and you don't understand what we're talking about, and Ethernet and token ring and jumbo packets and default MTUs, this class that's available out on YouTube for free, 4 hours and 56 minutes. It's awesome. You'll learn a ton. All right, Nitin, now in the blog, you guys kind of go from these large topics to a handful of smaller topics, not to say they're not important. The first one says enhancements to webcam redirection. I do want to, if you could, and maybe you're not the proper person, can you explain to our audience the difference between redirection and pass-through?
So redirection would be, if you're doing webcam redirection, it's utilizing a lot of the endpoints capabilities instead of just necessarily just passing through it. Just basically is redirecting a lot of the I'm just really going to simplify it too. And perhaps like Ben can, or the other folks on the call can kind of like get a little bit more in detail. But from my understanding, it's just basically improving the video quality by just doing a direct redirect instead of just passing through. And it's more, I know there's a lot more technical magic that's happening on in the background though.
So I'll let Bill take a shot at that one, and then I'll jump in if I need to.
You'll probably need to.
Okay.
So, my understanding is when you're redirecting the webcam, you're essentially using one of the virtual channels to send the packets directly out, not outside of the ICA, but outside of the standard channel. Whereas when you're doing pass through, you're passing it over the standard video channel. I'm not sure if that's right or not, to be honest.
So between the two of you, you got it right. And then here's my take on it, and I may not be right, and Ben will have to correct me, but redirection allows me to use some of the endpoints capabilities in the software magic within the Workspace app to leverage the endpoint capability for the webcam, and then to take that magic and pass it through a channel into the Citrix session on the back end so that it gets used and it's efficient and it works, right. But there's some magic involved. Pure pass-through is where I just take the USB protocol channel within the ICA and I just pass the USB through and I tell it what's allowed to pass through and what's not allowed to pass through. And then the VDA then has to have the appropriate drivers to know what to do with it. And I just have to suffer with whatever latency challenges are caused by passing, let's say, USB straight through.
And I think we can prioritize those channels. Didn't keep me honest here, but I think, to your point, Andy, you are channelizing it. You're throwing that information across that channel. And I believe, and again, didn't keep me honest here, we can prioritize those channels. So we can say, prioritize video over this or this over this. So that, again, would make a stronger, argument for being efficient, why we would want to roll this out.
Correct. Yes. And the reason why you prioritize is just for that reason, to make sure it's efficient. You're using bandwidth intelligently when it comes to what it is that you're trying to redirect or leverage.
Yeah. So here's the short message. If you can do it through redirection, do it through redirection. If you have to do it through passing through serial or passing through USB, then do it, but know that you're going to have to block a lot of stuff. Like you don't want your USB keyboard going straight to the virtual desktop and bypassing the endpoint because it just won't work at that point. So you try to redirect if at all possible. All right. So the next one here is SSL print job encryption. Nitin, what's that mean?
That's essentially just encrypting the universal print server. So it's just like the SSL and TLS connections related to printing through the VDA. So it's really into the weeds here, but it's essentially just encrypting the web service connections and the print data streams. Like basically, there's specific ports associated with those. Mm-hmm. I just know from the overall user benefit, or not end user, the benefit of this is just basically improving the security of the universal print server.
Yeah. And Bill's probably been around long enough to remember when the universal print server came out, and that was a huge accomplishment.
Yep.
And
so keep your print jobs from getting stolen.
Yeah, that's what he means. Next one is Windows Local Security Authority, LSA protection.
Yeah, that's essentially that we just didn't offer that type of support before. Windows LSA, which is it's a Microsoft aspect from my understanding of it. And it's just basically improving it's another sort of HDX, but also security type, feature that we're supporting.
The next one is near and dear to my heart because it's related to remote PC access, where you use Citrix to access your physical PC, whether it's at your desk or in the data center, whether it's a Blade or a full-blown PC of some type. A remote PC access enhancements, namely undocking and redocking capabilities in remote PC access. Are we talking about the VDA side of that equation or the workspace side of that equation?
That's the VDA side. So if you're using a docking station, you now can undock and redock. I think when remote PC first came out, that was a feature that was heavily requested, but we didn't support it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the enhancements that we released. Remote PC itself has done a number of enhancements over the past couple years. It's gone beyond from where it was just before, where you're just accessing the ability. You're putting a VDA agent on a desktop machine, and a user can now have access to that desktop machine. We've introduced a lot more capabilities when you are doing that. So if you're accessing Workspace app and you're accessing your remote PC that your IT team put a VDA agent on, you're now getting a lot more Citrix type enhancements associated with it.
Yeah. So I'll use this as a chance to say the following. Remote PC is a phenomenal solution. Ideally, you would use it with a physical PC, not a laptop. If you're going to use it on a laptop, it sounds like this now has the ability to allow you to undock and redock that laptop and it be able to connect back up. I will tell you that probably the worst project in my entire history, my career, was one that I had to drive 6 hours for both ways, 3 times. And it turns out that the customer was trying to do remote PC with a bunch of 10-year-old laptops that were covered in malware, and they were blaming Citrix on why it wouldn't work. And when I finally saw what they were connecting to, I was like, I can't believe you even tried this. What in the world? And he's like, well, your consultant said it would work. I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. These things barely turn on. They're not going to be great Citrix hosts.
Yeah, because that's quite a. That's not that's definitely not the ideal situation there.
Yeah, this predates Bill, man. I wish Bill would have been around back then so he could have gone and done that.
Yeah, just what I need.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I got there and it snowed like 8 inches and I was snowed in for a day or two.
Oh, great. Even better.
All right. Next topic goes back to maybe one from before, which is the rendezvous proxy support. Nitin, what are we covering there?
So yeah, when we released the rendezvous protocol, folks wanted proxy support. So that's some of the things that we released with some of the later VDAs in the 2020 year. So basically, we're allowing support of transparent and non-transparent proxies, which is something we weren't doing before when we released it, and it was one of those things that were like heavily in demand. If you wanted to set up a sort of a SOC, SOX 5 proxy or different types of, proxy configuration. Now, when you're getting in the proxy conversation, again, that gets in the weeds well above my level of knowledge, but I just know that was one of the key things that, what customers were looking for when we released that 2103 VDA.
And Bill, this kind of makes me think that the rendezvous stuff was for on-premises and cloud as well. Do you remember that part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think it was both. I think it would work either way. That's what I recall anyways.
Because the VDA was actually reaching out and creating some kind of stateful connection.
To the Citrix Gateway Service.
Right. All right, and then the final bullet here, which isn't the end of it all, but it's the end of the blog here, drag and drop files between Citrix session and local endpoint. Nitin, that's for most all workspace apps at this point, or is it for all workspace apps?
It's for the major ones for right now. I think Windows and Mac, but they are developing it for. I have to double check if it's supported on Linux workspace app yet. But it's pretty straightforward. What it is again, if the IT admin or your IT teams allow it, you can allow users to drag and drop files from the local machine to the virtual session and vice versa.
Yeah. So Nitin, we're at the end of the blog. I need you to do me a favor though. I need the next Citrix Synergy during the keynote, whoever the CEO at the time is, can you force them to spend 10 minutes talking about this stuff a little bit? Because this is still what makes it great to the rest of us. And, workspace with intelligent, that's cool. We're doing that too. But for us hardcore Citrix guys, there's 8,000 people sitting out in the crowd. This is what gets us going still. And on the last Synergy I went to, there was one slide and it was literally like 15 seconds of, yeah, we're still doing that stuff too. This stuff's still awesome. And we want to see more of it and highlight it more.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, I'm more biased because I work with the HDX team a lot and communicate with a lot of some of the stuff that they're coming out with. So it's really great we'd up level it. But yeah, I will try to see what I can do. Maybe send an email over to Dave Henshaw and say, hey, we should talk about HDX more.
Well, when you do that, say, you remember Andy Whiteside told you about this? Yeah, we had a conversation. True story. I know it won't drive the stock price, but that's okay. Go ahead.
But you know something, Andy, you make you make a valid point here is that, Citrix just works. And a lot of administrators might not understand under the covers how it works. The day-to-day administrators, the people that, they showed up to work, they had a Citrix environment, they've taken over, they're administering it day-to-day, but they don't understand the guts of it. These are the things that make us differentiators to our competition. These are things, in my opinion, and I hope everybody on the phone call believes this as well, that makes us better than our competition. The fact that we have a proprietary protocol that we can manipulate, that we can do MTU investigation on, that we can, secure printing, this SSL print to job encryption, that sounds like a small deal, but to a security person, the fact that I now can know that my print jobs can't be stolen by a hacker that's sitting inside my building, i.e. an employee, man, that's big stuff to me. That closes a loophole. So all these things, I think the day-to-day people just don't think about, but these are the things that really bring power to the platform and differentiate us to our competition and do make us a better selection when it comes to building a better user experience across a more efficient wire path.
So Ben, this is for most people, Citrix just works most of the time, and when it doesn't, it's probably not Citrix. But the stuff we're talking about today, these are the magical things that really need to be highlighted from time to time, that when those use cases get more complex, Citrix already has the scars on their knuckles to know how to have already done it.
I mean, this is just, Citrix is demonstrating continued innovation and advancement of their protocol and of their technology stack. And, that sends a clear message to customers that we still embrace and extend the desktop virtualization story because Citrix continues to innovate here and meet customer demand for things like Teams optimization and so forth. So, I see that as a key differentiator, but also a commitment that Citrix has made to keep things relevant and current for obvious reasons.
And Bill, you may be a customer who doesn't need one of these yet, but when you do need it, you'll be so glad it's there.
You'll be so glad it's there. Absolutely. And many customers needed it. Many customers that had Skype and other things needed it back a year ago now. And Citrix, acted pretty quickly to help get them optimized so they could work from home.
All right, Nitin, thanks for doing this. What else do you want to leave our audience with before we let you go? I've already got you on the calendar for a few more podcasts. What else do you want the group to know?
Yeah, it's just great. It's just great sort of a roundtable as far as our intent when we're talking about HDX technologies is improving that end user experience, because if you're improving experience, you're improving productivity, the way people are going to work every day. So that's essentially, we're constantly looking at ways as every VDA that we release is not only, it might look like a minor release when you're reading through the docs, but a lot of these when we're releasing stuff are just based on some organization out there is asking for this, and a lot of times it can be applied across every user base. But yeah, you can stay up to date on a lot of what we're releasing. I like to go to our citrix.com/blogs. It's where I put blogs out, and you'll see any kind of the latest, and you'll also be able to get a snapshot as far as what we're working on, whether they're private tech previews or public tech previews. You get a lot more information there too.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And we'll look forward to doing this with you again. Ben Rogers, anything else on your side?
No, Andy, I always appreciate you having me part of these events. I always learn a lot. You bring people like Nitin to the table who just continue to sharpen my saw and give me the knowledge I need to do well at my job. So I appreciate that, Andy. And thank you, Nitin, for being a guest on the show today. We really appreciate it. And lots of great information, man. Keep doing your thing.
Bill, anything else?
I would echo what Ben said. Thank you, Nitin, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys.
Hey, Nitin, are we going to go to Synergy this year? Or that's canceled, right, at this point?
It's still too early on getting everybody back for in-person events, but from what I'm hearing, we're making our plans for next year.
Yeah, I can't wait. I got about 8 boxes, maybe 20 boxes of Citrix T-shirts I need to hand out to people. I need to get to a conference. All right, gentlemen, thank you. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll do it again in a couple weeks.
Andy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thank you.